Yes. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. All right. I'm excited to do this Q&A call with everyone because I know that there's a lot of questions regarding hair tissue mineral analysis and mineral balancing. I know it's not super well known in the alternative and holistic space, not because it's not a valid test, but because it's not a straightforward result like lab test to interpret. And a lot of times, naturopaths and alternative medicine doctors or functional doctors don't want to take the time to deepen their knowledge and learn how to read in between the lines. I'm not putting shade on them. I know they've spent so many years, in become a naturopath and whatnot. So, like a hair tissue mineral analysis is just not as easy and straightforward to read compared to all these other functional lab tests that we're more kind of bombarded or more familiar with, right? Like the Dutch hormone test, OAT, the organic acids test, or GI stool map. They're easier to read because it's just giving us the levels that's in the sample. Now, a hair tissue mineral analysis doesn't necessarily correlate to our intake, but it's giving us a picture of what is going on within the cells. And when every time there's a cellular function that happens, minerals and metals are, get excreted to the tissues during respiration. Pardon my rooster. All right. So before I keep going, and before I forget, I always forget this part. I'm Fatima. I'm an integrative health and mineral balancing practitioner. I'm also a low tox lifestyle mentor. I've been low tox since 2010. And by cleaning up my lifestyle, I was able to get off Restoril, Zoloft, Ativan, and Xanax. Those were, I had depression, anxiety, and insomnia, and I felt like such an old lady, and I decided to take matters into my own hands. A few years later, I decided to become a certified health coach. And then a few years more, I decided to take the integrative health practitioner course through Dr. Carbal's IHP Institute, so that I could offer functional lab tests, because why should we guess when we can test and know exactly what's going on inside our bodies and get to the root cause of what's causing all our symptoms? All right, so now I'm just gonna dive right in. I'm gonna start with a question that was sent in the chat ahead of time in case she couldn't join live. And I'll also just pull up that page real quick, just in case someone, someone also decided to, whatchamacallit, put a question and I missed it. So far, there's no other questions. So I'll just go ahead and start with the questions that I already have right now, and then go from there, right? Okay. Are you ready? So this one is a question sent in by one of you who signed up. How will this type of testing help me with things I'm struggling with? I have PCOS, insulin resistance, Hashimoto's, and I have energy and sleep issues, as well as exercise resistance issues. And she had a hysterectomy, but her ovaries, she had a hysterectomy at 28, and now she's 42. All right. So basically, why minerals, why it's very important to have balanced minerals when it comes to PCOS and insulin resistance and any kind of hormonal imbalances is because minerals run the show. It's not really um, well known and it's not talked about a lot, but minerals are the backbones of our health. If our hormone or if our minerals are imbalanced, our hormones will be out of balance too, right? And it like dictates how our adrenals are functioning, how our thyroids are functioning. And so I just want to share real quickly. So PCOS may be related to a deficiency in chromium and zinc. So we all know that PCOS, I don't know if you've heard this, but a lot of our symptoms starts with a problem with insulin resistance, right? So, and it's just kind of like becomes a cascade of events. So when our calcium and magnesium balance, the ratio is off, it indicates that we're having a hard time regulating our blood sugar because calcium um kind of forget the term, but they basically communicate with the pancreas to release insulin, and magnesium is the one who communicates and tells the pancreas to stop releasing the insulin when it's all good and done, right? So when these two minerals are off balance, we can usually say we can usually in like the trend it will pinpoint if you're having problems with blood sugar regulation and whatnot. And if you have elevated levels of copper, mercury, and the toxic forms of iron and manganese, that can also cause PCOS. And obviously, we know estrogen dominance is another reason why we get PCOS. And women usually have the problem with the estrogen dominance, right? Um, and it's a sign that our liver is having a hard time detoxing because it's the liver that is the one that removes the excess estrogen. And so when we rebalance our minerals through mineral balancing, it will help reduce inflammation. It can help with weight loss and it reduces acne even. But here's the thing I want to remind you though. We have to think of weight loss kind of as the last thing that we have to worry about because there's a reason why our body is holding on to the weight. And usually it's because our bodies are very toxic. And when our bodies are toxic and our liver can't keep up with detoxifying, then it will push out all the toxins into fat because it's the safest storage because our body's main objective is to keep us alive, right? It's just a survival instinct, if you think about it. That's its main goal is to keep you upright. And so to prevent the body from getting poisoned, it's going to push out these toxins into fat storage. So as long as we're slowly detoxing and getting rid of these toxins, then our body will then be able to release the weight safely as well. With mineral balancing, it will reduce insulin resistance and it improves sugar handling ability of our body. It helps detoxify the liver, which then reduces estrogen and even androgens, right? That's the reason why PCOS, right? Our estrogen and testosterone are out of balance. And a lot of women complain about having chin hair growth that's dark. That's from the excess testosterone. And it also balances our whole body chemistry. So it really is just a very wonderful thing. And it's not a shortcut, right? This is deep healing. And while the results might not be instant, because we're undoing years and years of um, of our health decisions that we made throughout our whole lives. Um, but yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it definitely, you know, it's not going to be super strict with like diet and stuff. It's not going to be restricting you with anything, but it takes discipline and commitment to do this. If your goal is, optimal health and to get rid of all the symptoms that's interfering with your life. Now, Hashimoto's, hang on. Hey, go to your dad. Okay, so let's go to Hashimoto's, right? I know that a lot of times, people say that an autoimmunity is your body attacking yourself, but there's also now a new paradigm, a new way of thinking about what autoimmunity really is. If you think about it, our bodies are very intelligent. It's not really attacking itself, but it's attacking the toxins that are lodged in these organs in these cells, right? It's kind of called the cell danger response. It's just really trying to protect you, although it seems like it's not, right? So Hashimoto's is an opportunistic infection or an irritation of the thyroid gland. How does mineral balancing help with that? Is we're renourishing the body with dozens of vital minerals and vitamins and other phytonutrients that the thyroid and the body needs, right? Selenium, zinc, manganese are some important minerals needed to produce thyroid hormones, and it prevents inflammation of the thyroid. Now, a lot of us are deficient of selenium and zinc because, especially women who think that they need to stop eating animal protein, then they tend to do the plant-based diet or vegetarian diet, vegan diet. Those diets are very high in copper, which depletes the zinc. And then the selenium, it's almost kind of just like with iodine. Our soils are very deficient of selenium nowadays, so we are definitely depleted. And with iodine, it gets depleted when we get exposed to the other halogen metals, right? Halogen chemicals like chlorine, fluoride, bromide, all those things. So it's not your fault necessarily. We're just really bombarded with toxins left and right. And it's really hard. It's getting harder and harder to stay healthier, to have that optimal health because of this toxic world we live in, the toxic soils that our food is grown in. Our foods are depleted of minerals, so we're not getting what we need from food alone. The presence of convenience foods, just all these things, right? Now, I'm not saying to like go crazy and, like, oh, I'm gonna live in a bubble, right? We don't want that. We don't want to get stressed because stress is also a very, very bad toxin that depletes us of minerals as well. All right. When we do mineral balancing, we're improving our vitality level. So that means our oxidation or metabolic rate increases because we strive for balance, right? We don't want it to be slow. We don't want it to be fast because fast means that we're just burning through all these minerals that our body needs. We want it to be balanced. A lot of times, adults are slow oxidizers. That means our body has a harder time converting the food we eat into energy. There's a lot of interruptions. And so once that happens, our adrenals starts, like not necessarily misfiring, but it's not getting enough energy. And then it's not going to be giving the fuel to the thyroid for the thyroid to be able to function at 100%. And when we add in stress, you're stuck in fight or flight. That means your adrenals eventually will get burnt out And then it will just keep pumping low levels of cortisol all the time. And your cells also eventually become cortisol resistant. I know I don't think there's such a thing, but that's essentially what happens, right? If you, it's just kind of like with insulin resistance, we get so much insulin, eventually the cells will not open its door to receive the insulin, right? It's really such a horrible cycle. And then mineral balancing will remove toxic metals and other toxic chemicals from our body, and it improves the liver and kidney detoxifying ability. So those are just a few ways that mineral balancing can help with PCOS and Hashimoto's. Obviously, it will help with insulin resistance. Once we rebalance the minerals, everything will eventually start working the way it should. The body just needs the right raw materials. And we can't force all the organs to start working first. What first needs to happen is that minerals needs to be replenished and rebalanced, and then everything will work the way that it should. Okay, next, we'll do the next question. Why do we need to start with minerals? Like I mentioned in the introduction, minerals are the backbones of our health, hormonal health, immunity, bone health, even gut health, mental health, thyroid health, everything. It runs millions, trillions of enzyme functions in our body. And if they're off, then we're going to start feeling the low energy because the mitochondria can't produce energy. The longer we're suffering from low energy, then there's more tissue breakdown, right? Because your body can't convert your food to energy. It's going to start literally eating your own muscles, called the catabolic state. I was in that state before when I did my first hair tissue mineral analysis. And then it clicked. I'm like, oh, no wonder why I lost the baby weight really quickly after I gave birth to my fourth, and lost extra even. And that's when I lost my butt, because my body was eating itself because it couldn't digest the proteins that I was eating. Oh. Hi, Kayla. I'm just going to keep going, okay? If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or type it in the chat so I can answer it. I'm just answering questions that was sent to me directly from those people that are not able to join. All right, next question. Should I do a parasite cleanse first? Technically, no. I don't ever recommend anyone to do a parasite cleanse first, especially if they're very depleted and if we don't know, the heavy metal toxic load. Because essentially these parasites are actually doing something inside our body. They're helping our body with a toxic load, although obviously we don't want an overpopulation of them, right? It's really all about balance. They're useful in some way, but obviously if you get overgrown by parasites, then your body can't absorb nutrients because they're eating the nutrients and all that stuff. But let's say someone does a mineral balancing program she's in there for like 2 or 3 months, and then there seem to be no improvement because there's still a problem with absorption, then we would usually do maybe one round of parasite cleanse. At least the minerals are usually like repleted a little bit, and then that will help you not get depleted furthermore, just so that when the parasite load is not as high, then your body can start absorbing the minerals and nutrients that you're putting in, right? But we definitely don't want to start with a parasite cleanse from the get-go. I know it's becoming such a big thing, right? Everyone's talking about getting a parasite cleanse and whatnot. But then if you notice, if you're in these groups, you'll see a lot of people that are doing parasite cleanses every month, and still, they're still constantly purging all these parasites. But it's not because they're not getting rid of it. It's because the parasites just keeps coming back because the body doesn't have the energy to keep them in check, right? If your cells have the energy to keep the parasites in check, it will be able to get rid of it on its own. It really starts with stomach acid, right? And a lot of times people who have reflux and whatnot, the first thing a doctor would recommend to them are antacids, which is really terrible for you because you get reflux because you have low stomach acid. It's not really because your stomach acid is too acidic and then it's causing reflux. It's because your stomach is not able to digest the stuff that you're eating and then it's coming up as reflux. So it's really kind of counterintuitive to use antacids to help with GERD and any kind of reflux. And a lot of times nowadays, since we're very stressed, so that really affects our digestion. And I always encourage my clients to make sure to sit down, in a quiet environment, chew their food 20 to 30 times, and just, eat slower so that your body is digesting and absorbing the foods that you're eating. Like someone can tell me that they're eating 100% organic foods, whole foods, nothing processed and whatnot. But if you're not digesting properly, you're essentially just wasting your money because you're not absorbing any of it, right? So don't eat on the run if you can help yourself. We're we're in our lives are so busy. I used to stand in our kitchen while we're eating because my kids are always asking for stuff from the kitchen, and now I really make sure to sit down and eat. And then after I eat and after everyone eats, I don't immediately do the dishes. I sit down for 5 or 10 minutes to relax and make sure that, my body is digesting before I start doing the dishes. I used to not wait. I'm like, after I eat and everyone's done, I just immediately do the dishes. And I realized that that is not resting and digesting. Who's guilty of that? All right. Next question. What if I was exposed to mold? All right. This is also another thing, right? I used to be so obsessed with finding out, right? Oh, do I have like mold in my body? I'm going to do an organic acid test. Like when this whole world of functional lab testing opened up to me, I wanted to do all the tests. And then I realized that that's only going to add up to my health anxiety, right? You're like trying to, like, how do you say that? You're trying to just keep going after one thing after the other until I learned about minerals and how they're so important for our cells to produce energy. And when our cells have that energy that it needs, everything's functioning at 100%, it will also be able to expel out the mold. And when you get exposed to mold, it will be able to deal with it quickly, right? The more depleted we are, the more easily the heavy metals and the parasites and all these other toxins that we're trying to avoid, they get easily uptaken by our bodies. And then it will get stored. The reason why they get stored in our tissues, our organs, and our bones, it's because our liver can't deactivate them to be released safely through our poop, pee, or sweat, right? It almost really starts with a liver health, with our detox organs, right? I know we always hear it all the time. It starts with the gut. Then let's look more upstream, the liver, and more upstream, right? The mitochondria, that's like the most upstream of all of it. It's our cellular health. So when our cells are hungry of minerals, not able to let the good things in and not able to let the good things out. And that's when we start seeing seeing all these symptoms coming up, right? Hormonal imbalance is a symptom. It's not a root cause. Parasites, symptoms, not a root cause. It really comes down to our cellular health, and what does our cells need to function is balanced and replenished minerals. Because almost everything that we do, just if you're breathing, your minerals are depleted. Especially if you're not making sure that you're eating nutrient dense foods all the time, you're not managing your stress and all these things. It's just really a cycle, right? Minerals get burnt through when we are so stressed and when we get stuck in stress. And then we add in, processed foods, we add in hurried lifestyles, and then our food are just not as nutrient dense as way back in the day because our soils are literally dead. The overuse of fertilizers, like the phosphate fertilizers and all that stuff, it just gives us dead soil and then gives us dead food, right? There might be some mineral content still in our food, but it's not as great, obviously, as way back when. It's just a different world we're living in, unfortunately. All right, next question. Oh yeah, and your body we're going to be able to mobilize the mold because we're going to be also using other detox procedures, right? The near infrared saunas and coffee enemas. If you're comfortable doing that, you can do that. We definitely don't force you to do it. But those are some detox procedures that we recommend in this program. So those will help mobilize the toxins also from leaving the body. But we have to make sure that the cells have the energy to push them out. Otherwise, they're just going to recirculate in our body and then we're going to feel like literal shit, right? Yes, there's shit floating in your blood. Next, why not blood tests or urine tests, right? So when you think about blood, it has to stay within very tight parameters. It has to stay in homeostasis. And if you get exposed to lead, let's say an acute exposure to lead, within 30 to 45 days, your body will push out the lead from the blood to your tissues and your organs and bones because, like I mentioned earlier, your body just wants to keep you alive. It doesn't want to poison you. So when someone tests your blood and then all of a sudden the lead's not there, and they're going to say, oh, you're fine. No, you're not, because the lead didn't just go away magically, right? It went somewhere else. It goes to the tissues, the organs, to the bones. Lead loves to go to the bones. It replaces calcium. So if you're depleted of calcium, usually lead will take over the enzyme in like those docks. And while it might keep bone integrity a little bit, but it does weaken our bones. And so we see this a lot with, people that have very weak teeth or tends for osteoporosis. They usually have a heavy load of lead and cadmium in their bodies. Then the urine is just showing us of what is getting excreted at that time of sample collection. Now, the problem with this kind of test is if your kidneys are struggling, then we're not going to really see much, right? So it will just really depend on how healthy your kidneys are. Then we can see what's getting excreted at the time of sample collection. And here's how sensitive sort of the blood is, right? If someone's measuring your potassium levels, let's say, and you just ate a banana within 30 minutes before your sample collection, what happens is the blood will show that you have a good amount, good levels of potassium. But then when you compare that to a hair tissue mineral analysis, it will show that you're actually depleted of potassium and you need more. The reason why the hair for, especially for minerals and metals, why it's superior to blood and urine is because it's giving us a picture of what's going on over a 3-month period. We usually get a 1-inch sample, which is if your hair grows like, the average hair growth, it's 1 cm per month, about 1 cm per month. So then you get 4 cm, which is equivalent to about 1.5 inches or something like that. My math is wrong, correct me. But yeah, it's kind of like a biopsy, but not a painful one because we're just cutting the hair sample, right? I'm gonna look at the questions on my computer real quick. All right. Adrenals. Why not blood tests for hormones? All right. And this one's again about thyroid, right? A lot of women, we go to our doctors because we're low on energy, we're feeling really off, and we ask for a thyroid panel. A lot of times, conventional doctors will only get, tests like TSH. That's it. So it's not really a full thyroid panel. But also, what happens is with the blood, it only shows us what's floating at the time of sample collection. So even when let's say someone is taking thyroid hormone and the blood test will show that now their levels are normal, right? Because there's thyroid hormone floating in the blood from the medication, but they're still feeling like crap. The reason why they're still feeling like crap is because the cells, they're not permeable to the thyroid hormone. A thyroid hormone can't go into the cell and to convert to the active form, to T3 and whatnot. Then there's no point on taking these thyroid hormones, right? And that's the reason why we want to make sure the minerals are balanced so that the cells are more permeable to thyroid hormones, to our productive hormones, all the hormones that we have in our body, right? There's so many running our system, and it has to run like an orchestra, right? One is off, another one will be off. It's just never about one thing. Like you'll see people say, I have estrogen dominance. All right, if you have estrogen dominance, that means your progesterone is low and your testosterone might be all over the place. And what's your cortisol? Is your cortisol dysregulated? Your insulin? Like there's so many hormones running our body that it's just never about one thing. If one of your organs is not functioning at 100%, usually, let's say the adrenals, well, a lot of times it's right, the thyroid, like, oh, I have slow thyroid, I have hypothyroidism. And then the doctor forgets to address the adrenals because it starts with the adrenals. Adrenals is the one that's giving the thyroid the fuel to crank up the energy, right? So if your thyroids are off, that means your adrenals are also off. Our body is a whole system. They all work together, in such a beautiful and intricate way. And we just have to remember that when addressing our symptoms and when we're looking for answers for our health. Someone asked if we're able to figure out vitamin requirements from an HTMA. So an HTMA really focuses on minerals and heavy metals, but there's specific relationships between minerals and vitamins. And so we're able to figure out what the body needs based off of what the minerals are doing. So let's say let's say, so vitamin C affects iron absorption. So that's why they always remind us to eat. That's why the Spanish and Mexicans always have a lime with their refried beans, because the vitamin C will help your body absorb the iron from the beans, right? And then, but then vitamin C reduces copper retention. So for someone who has copper toxicity, a lot of times it's a hidden copper toxicity. Um, we usually add vitamin C to help mobilize the copper and get rid of the toxic forms out of the body. And then we have boron. Boron influences the status of vitamin B2. B2 affects the relationship between calcium and magnesium. So just like with minerals and metals that have a synergistic relationship or antagonistic relationship with each other, which means, it can make it go up or it can deplete it. It's the same with vitamins. It's the same with hormones even. It's just really a very fascinating thing. It's like all the information that we find out using a hair tissue mineral analysis. Okay. It says, how can an HTMA help me achieve better health? Well, because we'll know exactly what your body needs. We're not just, playing Russian roulette with what minerals you need and what type of food you need to eat. Because the way we eat too also depends a lot on our oxidation or metabolic rate. So not everyone will have the same way of eating, although this is not going to be like, oh, you need to go on keto or animal based whatnot. We're utilizing a balanced diet, but we might be, let's say for slow oxidizers, they don't need extra fat or oils because it will slow them down further. And then for fast oxidizers, we are going to add more fat and oils in there because we need to slow them down a little bit. And like I mentioned, we're striving for balance, right? We don't want you to be super fast. We don't want you to be super slow. We want you to be balanced where your body is able to deal with stress when it happens and your body knows how to move the stress out and then go back to your baseline. So an HTMA can help. An HTMA shows us, like I said, 40,000-foot overview of our health, right? It will tell us about your thyroid health, your liver health, your adrenals, your kidneys, how well your body is regulating blood sugar, the glucose, your gut health, the state of your autonomic nervous system. So we're able to know if you're stuck in fight or flight and whatnot, or if you're stuck in parasympathetic mode. Because we also don't want to be just in parasympathetic mode, because that means our immune system will be kind of like dialed down. That's why I said we want balance, right? We want to be able to activate the sympathetic mode when there's stress, and then we want to get back down to parasympathetic when the stress is over. That's really the goal. And a lot of times, my most common thing with my clients are they're stuck in sympathetic mode. They're stuck in fight or flight. And so their sodium and their potassium are very depleted. And that means their kidneys are overworked. The liver, the adrenals are burnt out. And so then there's sluggish thyroid. And then the body, when it's in slow oxidation, will hold on to a lot of these heavy metals and toxins. And we really don't want that, because that's also considered an internal stress, which keeps our body in fight or flight. Even the waste from all the cellular functions inside our bodies are considered an internal stress. So we really just want all the organs function at 100% so that everything works seamlessly, right? That's the goal of mineral balancing. All right, next. All right, I think I'm out of questions. But yeah, a lot. So I'll show real quickly an example of what a hair tissue mineral analysis result looks like. I'll share it with you, Kayla, and whoever's watching the replay, you'll be able to see it. So this is my retest results. This is my latest one in September. So the lab will essentially send us, something that looks like this. And it might look, right, it looks like it's a simple thing to read, but this isn't necessarily mean that I'm taking too much calcium and now it's going over the ideal levels. This one means that either I have toxic forms of calciums that's getting dumped out, or my calcium is getting released into the tissues, which we don't want that to happen because we want the calcium to be in the bones, right? When the tissue starts getting excreted to the tissues, that's when we get calcification. And that happens a lot with people who get heart attacks, and they do autopsies on them, and then they see a lot of calcifications in their arteries and in their heart. So we definitely don't want that, right? I am still kind of within a healthy range. The other lab, there's only 2 labs that we recommend, but I prefer ARL because the graphs are not confusing to look at. They changed their ideal level for calcium to 63. And their reasoning behind it is because we're living in a more toxic and a more, like stressed out world and whatnot. And so they adjust some of the levels. ARL still stuck with Dr. X levels when he did all like hundreds of thousands of tests, and he got the average of the really healthy ones, and it was 40 milligrams percent. It's basically parts per million that that's getting excreted is fine. Like this is when your, our knows when to contract, and what's the other term? But yeah, it's basically, but I'm still with the healthy levels or the modern ranges. Then it's showing that my sodium and potassium are over the ideal ranges. And to me, it's because I'm pregnant. And when you're pregnant, it's like a stress test for your liver and your kidneys. So the body is in a little bit of stress. And when that happens, like the initial stage of stress, our kidneys will excrete sodium and potassium. So those usually shoot up high when you're in the initial stage of stress. And then it goes back down when you're done with that stressful event. Now, like I mentioned, if someone gets stuck in fight or flight, eventually the sodium and potassium will go way down here. I have some clients who are 1 ppm, 2 ppm for their potassium, and that's a sign of being stuck in fight or flight. Okay, what sort of treatment do you offer once labs are accessed, especially for a child? All right, so I always start off with a hair tissue mineral analysis because that usually gives us a lot of the answers of why a child is experiencing all these symptoms. And if you feel like after we do that, the hair tissue mineral analysis, I give a very comprehensive report that explains everything, what's going on within the cells and whatnot. And if we feel like, okay, if after maybe a few months of mineral balancing and changing the diet and the lifestyle, if the child or the client is still experiencing other, like symptoms that's really bothering them, then we can always, figure out another test to do. We can do, if it's gut issues, we can do a microbiome gut test, or an organic acids test. Because organic acids will also show us, like the absorption of the vitamins, and it can show us two strains of mold. It's not very comprehensive compared to if you do a specific mycotoxins test, then it will show us all these different kinds of species of mold, right? But so far, in my experience, ever since I started offering hair tissue mineral analysis, my clients haven't needed to do other kinds of testing because they immediately start seeing improvements, to their health. Although sometimes, right, let's say you're focused on um you want energy. That's the first thing you want back. But with mineral balancing, we don't know what symptom will go away first because we're counting on, we're relying on our body's wisdom on what symptoms it will release first. But a lot of times you have to feel tired before you have more energy. Sometimes you'll feel worse before you feel good because it's an unwinding of, all it's kind of like we're unwinding a tape. You know how those cassette tapes back in the day and you rewind it? We're doing that with our body. We're rewinding old patterns and, like releasing stuck emotions, stuck traumas, releasing metals. And we usually retrace our past patterns, which we didn't know what our patterns were because we didn't test before, but at least we kind of have a baseline, right? So, Kayla, what um specific symptoms? Yes, yes, mineral balancing definitely helps eliminate molds and parasites. And but the reason why we don't do like a separate parasite cleanse or a separate mold protocol is because once the cells have the energy to deal with all that doesn't belong inside the body, it will expel it themselves. And we also use, you know, detox procedures like near infrared saunas that will you know, help increase internal temperature, which will help kill parasites and pathogens like mold, fungus, right? And then at that point, if someone is not eating a lot of vegetables, they're not getting enough fiber, then we can add in some binders to help bind whatever was released when we sweat out, when we do the sauna, right? We use a binder to help capture everything that got killed off to get released from the body. But yeah, a lot of times there's people that will do parasite cleanses every month or maybe every 3 months. And if they're very data driven, they'll do a stool test, the 3-day collection, because that shows us a better picture of, the what's in our stool. Like a 1-day stool test doesn't really show us anything. And then they'll do a parasite cleanse and they'll see a lot of parasites getting released. And then they retest 3 months later and they still have high parasites because the body doesn't have the energy to keep them in check. So they just keep coming back. Yes, I do everything virtually. So, um, and I have one-off test consults where it's very hands-off. It's just you do a test and I send you an emailed personalized healing plan. And then it's very hands-off support. It's like a month of extra support just in case you have questions, but only all through email. There's no calls, but you can add in optional calls. How will I get a sauna? Um, you can either find a healing like a detox spa that has near infrared saunas, or you can also, if you're able to, um, you can do a portable sauna. There's I don't know what's called. Is it Therasage or Therasage? I call it Therasage. Therasage has a portable sauna that you can use, and you can also add in more bulbs in there if you wanted more heat. But I found that it's gets pretty hot in there. And then there's another brand that I really love. They're out from they're I'm pretty sure they're in Pennsylvania, and they make these beautiful basswood saunas that's just kind of like one person, so it's not super expensive. Or you can get they have like a sort of portable one where it's it has framing, and then it has the canvas around it, and then you get the heat lamps in there, and so you're getting the heat from these infrared near infrared light bulbs. It's basically the bulbs that you use in chicken coops. If you're familiar with that, you want them to keep laying eggs in the wintertime. So it puts out a lot of heat. And I've seen people, you know, like they just find a small closet in their house and then they put the bulbs in there. And that's sufficient enough to heat up the space and get you sweating and, you know, killing whatever pathogens are inside the bodies and releasing heavy metals. And even sometimes I don't go inside a sauna, especially now that I'm pregnant, but you can also use those heat lamps. You have one bulb, just one bulb, you can use it as a spot treatment. Let's say I have lower back pain, I would just shine the light bulb on my back and it helps greatly. Like it's amazing. Lights. Um yeah, they have those Spurty. It's this brand. Spurty, the UV lights that are great for vitamin D if you're not getting enough sunshine where you are. Those are a wonderful alternative, although they're kind of on the pricey side. I think they're like $400 if I'm not mistaken, but it's the best brand to get if you're wanting the vitamin D lamp. It's the most authentic and it gives you like um full spectrum of the UV that you need to activate, you know, your body's ability to make the vitamin D. So that's a great investment to have. And, you know, just getting sunshine, even though if it's cloudy outside, we're you go outside and even if it's cloudy, you're still getting the UVA and the UVB rays that will help with the vitamin D. So even if it's cloudy, you should still go outside with no sunscreen on, right? Have as much skin exposed as possible. And if the sun is out, especially first thing in the morning, it's great to get the sunlight on your eyeballs and on your skin so that it will eventually, sunlight exposure is really great for cortisol regulation and even for all the other hormones. It's like a great hormone regulating tool is the sunlight. I know they've demonized the sunlight, but it's not what causes cancer. Obviously, we have to be mindful of our sun exposure, right? When it's because we need the solar noon for our body to create vitamin D. So I'm going to type it here, D Minder. It's an app that you can get on your phone and you put your zip code in and then it tells you when the solar noon is and it even gives you a range of the time that you have solar noon available where you're at because it depends on the angle of the sun. And then that's the best time of day that you get sunlight exposure and your body's gonna produce so much vitamin D. It's amazing. And this is also a way, I know a lot of people are nervous about vitamin D supplementation and, you know, like taking too much and whatnot. If you're getting exposed to the sunlight or even the Spurty lamp, our skin will shut off when it's got enough. When it's already gotten enough vitamin D for the day, your skin will shut off those receptors and your body will stop producing vitamin D. Our bodies are very incredible. And we just have to always remember that, right? Our bodies can heal. We just have to give it the right raw materials so that everything works properly. We just have to really, trust that instinct. Um, yes, I do use. I don't recommend it a lot, the homeopathy and herbal remedies. Although homeopathy is great. It's a great um complement to mineral balancing, especially when someone is going through healing reactions of some sorts, because sometimes we do go through that. It will just help tone down the healing reactions. And herbal remedies. I'm a big fan of herbs. It just has to come down to sourcing because, like I mentioned, our soils are very toxic, and so a lot of these herbs now can be loaded with heavy metals, and we kind of want to um, lower the volume, right, of our heavy metal exposures. So I always make sure that we're getting these herbs from, as much as possible, I would prefer it to be, family farms here in the United States, or, wherever you are, and your source, their farming practices, and organic. Organic is key, especially when it comes to herbs and tinctures, because we're getting, it's very potent, and we don't want to ingest the pesticides and whatnot that's getting sprayed on them. Do you have another question? Let's see if I have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. How long can treatment take? Okay, so it will depend on how depleted the person is to begin with. But we always go with, I recommend doing a retest every 3 months or every 4 months, depending on the client, um, budget, and depending on how they feel, because a lot of our body chemistry changes within 3 or 4 months. A lot of times people will start, and then they're slow oxidation, and all of a sudden they'll switch to fast oxidation, and they won't feel great taking the supplements for slow oxidation. And so we'll know that it's time to do a retest so we can assess, what changes we need to make for the supplements and for the diet, and, the lifestyle and stuff like that. But mineral balancing is a marathon, it's not a sprint. My mentor has been mineral balancing for 10 years, and it's only now that he's seeing huge dumps of the heavy metals, especially lead and cadmium. Those two heavy metals are the hardest to expel from our bodies. Sometimes it takes 20 years for cadmium to fully get detoxed out of our bodies. But I've also seen Dr. Selig. He shared that almost everything comes in it's almost everything is a 7-year cycle. So we need to give at least 7 years for our bodies to fully eliminate all these metals. And if you think about it, they say it takes 9 months to replenish iron to the optimal level. So with mineral balancing, we're not only focusing on one mineral, we're focusing on, how many minerals are there? For this test, it's showing us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 16. These are 16 minerals and trace minerals that we're trying to replenish and rebalance. So it will take time. And what we usually advise too is, if someone starts feeling way better after, 1 or 2 retests every 3 or 4 months, then we can pull back and do a retest every 6 months or every year. It just really depends on the client. I myself, because I've been very data driven and I want to see the movements and the improvements I'm having with my, on being on the mineral balancing program. I've been retesting every 8 weeks. But then ever since I got pregnant, I pulled back to every 12 weeks because I know that I'm not doing any detox procedures like saunas and coffee enemas. So I know that there's not going to be a lot of movements for my heavy metals, but I still kind of want to see, you know, what's going on with my minerals because I'm not taking a prenatal vitamin. I'm taking the supplements based off of my HTMA. So I know what my body really needs. And that's what I'm supplementing with. I'm not just, taking a random prenatal and possibly messing up my copper, which I have hidden copper toxicity. So if I'm taking prenatals with copper and my body's not mobilizing it, then I'm gonna possibly suffer or experience postpartum depression and anxiety because of the excess copper that's not going to where it needs to go. It's just floating in your body. So I've been really, you know, um, impressed with having this data and knowing what my body needs and not just taking random supplements and wasting my money on, you know, supplements that it doesn't need. And then we're either just peeing it out or we're causing an imbalance because our liver still needs to process these supplements, right? Even the food-based ones. So when we're randomly supplementing, we're adding a load for our liver. If our liver is already overburdened, then we're really gonna feel that in our bodies, right? Our adrenals start getting weaker and tired, and then our thyroid gets affected, and then we'll have hormonal imbalances, and it's just really a domino effect when we do that. I used to have a graveyard of supplements, but now I don't. But yeah, so it just really depends on, a lot of, if you're talking about a child, children usually will have a shorter um treatment window because they're not as toxic as us adults, and hopefully they're not as depleted. But we also have to remember that when we got pregnant with them, we pass on our deficiencies, our imbalances, and our toxicities to them while we're making them, right? And so my oldest one got my copper toxicity because I had just gotten off birth control and I got pregnant with him within like 4 months after I got off birth control. And so my body was still highly copper toxic and I passed that toxicity to him. But yeah, we do pass on, you know, we pass on 4 pounds of our minerals to the growing baby. And so, a lot of times we have kids that are already very depleted, even though they're still young. So it just really depends on each person. Some people can probably get away with just doing it for a year. I know there's a doctor. He was a conventional doctor and then he started using hair tissue mineral analysis in his practice, and he said that he prefers his clients to stay on a mineral balancing program for at least a year. And it's even better if they stayed for longer than that, just because, like I mentioned, we're unwinding all these past health decisions that we've made that has gotten us here today where we're suffering from a lot of symptoms. Stop share. All right. Do you have another question? We can keep going. I don't think I have any more questions on my list. And the fascinating thing about minerals and metals too is they can there's like specific personalities that are kind of related to them. Like if someone has very high nickel, they can be very they kind of somewhat have that heavy metal rocker personality, kind of dark, kind of depressed, the emo rocker. And then if someone has a good amount of silicon in their body, they're usually very chill, like a surfer personality. And then obviously lead is called the horror metal. And a lot of the serial killers and criminals actually have a lot of lead in their bodies. Um, Now with most kids, probably even adults with ADHD, you know, like behavioral issues, there's definitely a heavy metal component to this because their bodies are having a hard time getting rid of these heavy metals. Even copper can cause anxiety and insomnia once it gets stored in the brain. When the copper can't go anywhere because the ceruloplasmin is not present to take it to where it needs to go, the body will eventually store the excess copper in our liver, and then it also likes to be in the brain, and that's when we get the wired but tired person, right? You're so tired all day, you'd think that you'd fall asleep easily at night, and then when you lay down in bed, all of a sudden your mind doesn't stop racing with thoughts, and you're so tired but your brain doesn't want to shut off. That's usually a sign that there's copper toxicity or a copper imbalance. um but yeah, a lot of kids too that are prone to cavities usually have high lead in their bones, and obviously a depleted calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus, because all those three are needed for strong teeth. Um, a lot of skin issues like acne, even stretch marks, can be a zinc deficiency. And it can also be a copper imbalance because copper is related to collagen production in our body. But yeah, it's the mineral world is so fascinating, and we really are able to reverse and resolve a lot of symptoms when our minerals are replenished and rebalanced. Because once our body becomes toxic, our body, all our organs will start not functioning at 100%. And it starts with the liver, gets overloaded, and then we become toxic. Our adrenals become stuck in fight or flight because it's constantly getting um bombarded the toxins. It's stressing it out. It thinks that it's fighting something, and then the thyroid gets affected. When the thyroid function gets dialed down, then we'll have low energy, we'll have you know problems getting pregnant, because when our thyroid is things that we're stuck in fight or flight, it will stop doing the functions that's not needed for survival, and that's reproduction, digestion. That's why we start getting weight loss resistance. When our liver is overburdened, our bile becomes stagnant, then we get gut issues. So everything is connected, and we just need to give the body the right raw materials in the form of the proper minerals and making sure that we're absorbing these minerals, we're absorbing these nutrients from the food that we're eating, we're avoiding as much toxic exposure, then our bodies will start healing itself because it wants to keep you alive. All right. I think there's no more questions. So I'm going to end this Q&A call. Let me know when you catch this on the replay. Um, Feel free to get in touch with me after you watch the replay and you have more questions. I can always answer them directly, or you can post more questions in the either the chat or in the community feature of the app. Right when you signed up, you'll see it on the top. There's a community feature, and I'm gonna restart a new thread where I'll tag everyone, and then so that you'll know where to post the questions. All right. Thank you. Have a good one.